We're over here laughing because we both work in audio. We both know podcasting, and I'm here with Drew Cost, who is a podcaster, of course, and also a life coach, a communication coach for people who want to get unstuck mentally. And yes, we were joking about a little bit of audio and stuff, but you just brought something up to me before we started recording, which is so many people come up and say, I hate social media. I don't want to do social media, but it seems like it's required. And so what do you do and tell people who are in that battle, in that struggle with social media?
Well, first, I'm so happy to be here. I'm a big fan of Isabella, so I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
The first thing I want them to realize is that you want to think about social media as a tool if you decide to use it. Um, it's just like a hammer or a pliers. It can be good when it's in the right place or the right hands, or it can be bad if it's in the right place or right hands. I like to think that social media usually becomes something that is bad when someone's always judging themselves, comparing themselves, or feeling that they have to put on some other person when they actually get on social media. And my thought is always, if you're just being you, the people who are going to gravitate towards you will do that. And the people who want to do either business with you or just connect with you, they'll find you a lot easier. My reason for the whole thing of hating social media is I just hate what it does to people when it comes to comparing and people feeling that they're not up to speed with somebody else. It's a lot of things that people don't need to put on their plate, in my opinion.
So if someone is really resistant to it and they're just saying, "Hey, I can't do this anymore." What are their other options?
First option would be don't use it at all. If you have a business and you don't have social media, I think it's going to be a bigger struggle because media is not going anywhere. Social media is not going to go anywhere. That's where people are at a lot. The second option I would say is see if you can hire. I would say first hire a content like manager or a content creator to do some of your stuff before you go to a big agency. Hire someone that's small so that they can learn your style, they can learn your brand. They're usually a little bit more invested because they're only working with a handful of people. And then the third option I would say is let's confront the reason why you don't want to do it. You might be literally looking at it through the wrong lens. I literally just got off a call before this interview with someone who was just looking at social media with the wrong lens, and we just helped them refrain how to look at it, how to use it, and when you're done using it, go about your day.
What was the process for you of getting that new lens, of getting a lens where you felt comfortable showing up through your podcast, through the social media, through threads, all of these different places? How did that shift for you?
For me, I always look at it now as there's one person that day who might need something that I'm going to share. And if my content can help that one person, I'm good for the day. If it helps that person get over a barrier or a hurdle or get unstuck, I'm cool with that. And I realize that social media, if it's threads, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, that doesn't make up like my worth as a person. It's just a tool I'm using, but my worth as a person doesn't come from that. So it allows me just to show up. When I'm creating content, I'm really just documenting what's going on with the day or things that I'm thinking that's going to help somebody out. So I'm not looking at it as this big thing I have to master. I may not ever master it. My goal is just to help that one person per day.
Yeah. And you coach people on communication, on how they're presenting their message. And I do think that when people hear that, they might think, oh, Drew's going to change me. Drew's going to change the way that I put myself forth. But from what you've been saying, you really want them to embrace themselves and embrace what they're doing. So how do you elevate someone's communication without changing them?
That's a good question. The first way to do it is to validate them as a person. A, like you're worthy. I always say B, you're dope. And C, your uniqueness of who you are is really what makes you you. It's really what makes your brand your brand. It's really how you do it. So Giving you my voice or my style would ruin it because that's not who you are. So validating them first, and then B, showing them different ways that they can still use their own voice. Maybe you like to do it in a podcast format, which is a little different than most people. Isabella's a pro at that. Maybe you like to just do it where it's a walk and talk. Maybe it's just audio only with like a different video on top. There's different ways you can do it, but validating the person, showing them different styles within their style, and then just getting them comfortable to realize you don't need to compare, because it could turn into you turning into somebody else, and your audience doesn't want somebody else. Like as cool as I am, I could never be Isabella. I could never be her, but she's cooler.
I don't think it's about being cooler, but I can definitely hear someone who's listening to this right now and is just saying, no, I'm not that unique. I'm not that special. There's somebody else who does what I do better, or there's somebody else that does what I do already. And they're sitting here being like, Drew doesn't get it. I'm just not that special. What is the message to that person?
The bread aisle. If you go down any bread aisle, you're gonna see tons of bread. You're actually gonna see tons of bread from the same company. Like Wonder makes like white bread, potato bread, multi-grain bread. It's more so you not allowing yourselves to feel that you don't have a space in any industry that you want to be in. Yes, there are people doing it. Yes, there are people doing it better because they may just be better for some reason. It doesn't mean you can't be good either. But your uniqueness, I always think, is your voice is for somebody else's ears. And usually it's a verse I used from the Bible that talks about my sheep know my voice. Your people are going to hear you totally different than they hear somebody else. When I look at threads, and I'm not even saying this to be joking, looking at Isabella's stuff, I can see how she's saying it because I've listened to some of her podcasts. So I read it totally different than I would read somebody else's. And people who are meant to work with you or connect with you, they want your voice. They don't want just everybody else's voice.
Yeah, and thank you. I'm like, thank you for saying that. But I think it's also so interesting, the ability to sometimes hear something differently. It could be the exact same words. And I'm thinking a lot of like, people will misattribute a lot of quotes to Winston Churchill. And they'll all be like, oh, it was Winston Churchill. And it's like, maybe it wasn't, but there's something to it where they just hear it in a specific way, even if it's the exact same 10 words, just because it came from somebody, or because that person was closer to them or further from them, or looked like them or didn't look like them. They were older, they were younger. There's always something that connects, even if everyone else is exactly the same.
With that, something that you had said, and it was the episode you had did about like your logo and your cover art for your podcast, right? I've heard that before, but what was different when I heard yours was it wasn't a judgmental voice. It wasn't a voice like, you are crazy for putting 80,000 colors and making the graphics so small because people can't see that. It was more so like, hey, I have a suggestion for you that you can take and use it or not. Either way, I just want to give it to you and then I'm out of there. Versus you hear somebody else's just delivery style and it's like, you're wrong. You shouldn't do this. You should not have a podcast if you don't know these basics. And like you said, just the way somebody words it and someone says it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Going back to the question of not changing people with their communication style is like, I was just having a conversation with a friend who, she's growing her business and she's amazing at what she does. And she said, people don't like the way I talk. And I'm like, yeah, bestie, like, let's fix it. But then so when I was giving advice on like, hey, like, what if you phrased it this way? Or what if we came at it this way? Her first reaction was, but this is how I talk. And it did come off, no shade to her, it did come off a little judgmental, a little abrupt. And it was such an interesting conversation because I didn't really know what to say, where I was like, yeah, you kind of have to change how you deliver the message.
Hmm.
But her reaction was, I don't want to change. And so I think there's like that interesting dynamic that I'm hoping you have an answer to.
Communication goes both ways. I think to be good at communicating, if you want to be good at communicating, you have to be good at listening, and you have to learn that your communication is going to also be based on the person who's listening. So how someone can talk to their brother and communicate well, they can be horrible at communicating with their sister. So I think if you want to be good at communicating, which if you have a business of any sort, that's something you should consider, unless you're all AI. But the listening part is, I usually do this exercise with people. We sit on a Zoom together and we listen to one of their videos. And I just ask them to just like watch their body language. What do you hear? We're not here to like judge you. What do you hear in this video? And then I ask them if they're comfortable, we bring somebody else on and we see their expressions and stuff like that, because oftentimes they can be they can be communicating from a good place and not realizing that it's just jaded, maybe because of that day, maybe because of something they haven't worked out, or maybe they think this is the only way that people actually listen. When I coached fitness, I was the fitness trainer who wasn't sitting there yelling at people. And my motto was, if I have to always yell at you to do something, we haven't figured out what it is that's driving you. Because I don't want to yell because I'm an introvert. And when I found out they don't need yelling, they need to be reminded of what their purpose is, what the goal is. And that helped. But letting someone hear themselves with you watching has done some good. It gets sticky sometimes, but
Wow. That I can just see that being such a powerful exercise. And I think my initial reaction to that was I've been rewatching some of my sales calls and or just calls with clients, and I do notice that I'm different with each client or with
hmm
each person. And part of me has wondered, is that me being inauthentic or is that me matching the situation? And I think that that's a question that a lot of people will have.
I don't think it's being inauthentic. I think it's more so adjusting to the temperature in the room, so to say. Like if I'm in Hawaii, it'd be foolish for me to be out there in a hoodie right now because it's too hot. But I'm in Connecticut right now and it's raining and it's cold. I think adjusting to the temperature in the room, so to say, lends itself to you having uh, a broad way of communicating. I'm not becoming somebody else. I'm just talking the language of that person at that moment. If you talk to someone who was Spanish and they didn't understand English, no matter how much you yelled in English, they still can't understand it if they don't understand English. And I think if we look at communication like that, the language barrier to me isn't only like a Spanish, English, or French. It's more so, how does that person actually hear things? And that could take time, but it gives you a greater way of impacting somebody, especially working with a client.
Absolutely. And I know we've been talking about this from the lens of marketing, external communication, but this also lends itself to your other work of being a life coach and really helping people with their relationships. And as soon as you said that, I'm kind of thinking, how would this change the way I speak to my friends, or how would I change the way that I speak to a coworker, and really embracing that. And so how do you see the skills translating?
I see them similar in a lot of ways. The main way is, if you're gonna have constant communication with somebody, you want to learn about them. You want to learn about. You don't have to be a therapist, but you want to kind of learn some things about them. Like if I was talking to Isabella, and I knew every time I talked loud, she got triggered, it would be foolish for me to keep approaching her with a loud voice. Same thing if I knew that when I talked about certain topics, it would throw her off. If I didn't need to talk about those topics, I wouldn't. Something that I learned from a therapist, she said, men and women in general, men are going to speak more so like in two sentences. They're going to get to the point. Women might give you the point, the details, the footer, and then a little bit of extra sauce at the end, which means those two communication styles, they already clash. It's more so understanding, like, do I want to be understood or do I want to understand this person first? And my thing is always telling the person, if you understand the other person on the other end, it's going to be a lot easier for them to understand you. But it doesn't mean it's going to always be perfect. You have to learn the people you're going to be consistently communicating with. And if it's somebody I'm having a one time conversation with, I'm more so going in there to listen, unless they're specifically asking me for advice. If they're asking me to listen, hey, I'm here to be a sounding board to help you brainstorm. Nothing may come out of this conversation for me, and that's perfectly fine. I became a better listener that day.
That's wonderful. And I think that that's something that so many people struggle with is knowing that line. But I'm thinking of the person who is hearing that
Mm-hmm.
and is saying, I'm always seeking to understand and no one understands me. Like no one doing the same for me. And there's a little bit of that like feeling that resistance where they're like maybe fed up with people pleasing or fed up with trying to be overly empathetic. And
Mm-hmm.
now they're trying to find their voice. Where does that balance come in for you?
Number one, I'm gonna say sit with yourself and journal why you need to be people pleasing because that term comes up a lot. I'm always this for everybody. Nobody's this for me. Have you voiced that you need someone to be that for you? And oftentimes you haven't. You just feel because you're such a good person to everybody else that someone should just magically appear out of the sky and be a good person to you. And sometimes life doesn't work that way. So I usually encourage people to, you may have to find a friend that's not near you at first. You may have to find somebody that's a little further, maybe a little older, and maybe let them know like, hey, I'm just seeking someone to understand me and things like that. And going into something like that, people are a little bit more receptive. But I would first say, sit and journal. Why do you need to be a people pleaser? Why do you feel that you need to be everything for everyone? And that solves a lot of issues by itself. The second thing I would say is if you are everything for everyone, you're probably not doing them a great service either. Because no one outside of like your kids should be that dependent on you. Like they should have other circles, they should have other people to talk to as well. But the last thing I would say is definitely therapy. Like, see if you and your therapist can pick apart why you or when you started to feel the need of, I need to become everything for everyone. And they can give you a better answer than I could. But journal first, ask someone for help that you want to be understood, and then therapy if you can get into it.
That's so wonderful. And I fully agree. I think therapy has been such a necessary component of my growth and the people around me's growth. And you as a coach have been clear through this conversation on like when there's a line of like, hey, this is gonna be therapy. But I know that oftentimes there's this blurriness around when is something appropriate for coaching versus when is something appropriate for therapy. And how do you usually communicate that to your clients?
First, I let them know in the beginning I have a therapist, and I let them know I have a therapist or therapist friends who I know who I can refer them to if it's something outside of my scope. And the reason why I say that up front is there are going to be things outside of my scope probably. And if it's outside of my scope, I can't properly serve you. I don't want to give you some plan that's outside of my scope that doesn't work for you and actually hinders you. But I learned that lesson the hard way. I was a fitness coach for 14 years, and sessions were turning into straight crying sessions, straight venting sessions, and everything was coming out in sessions. And I started realizing I was like, I'm not a therapist. Like I don't want to be a therapist. Like I don't have those answers that you're next to this barbell crying about. And I know emotions come out when you're working out, but I don't have that. So let me give you someone's number who who can give you a greater service because I can't do that. But I can help you get in shape though.
And I think, good. I think that's so interesting. Like the the dynamic where people say, coaches can replace therapy, or fitness can replace therapy, or, journaling can replace therapy. And you're really
Never.
advocating for a holistic approach.
Never. It could they're not this they're not the same thing. Coaching is not digging into someone's past. Coaching is where are you at right now? How can we get you to the next thing? And it's not fair. Like I think when people say that, they're just trying to be stingy, or they're just thinking that it's a shortage of people for services. There's billions of people on the earth. If I give clients to my therapist or my therapy friends who I can't help, they're probably going to do that in return to me. And I can't handle the load that a therapist can handle the proper way because I don't have that skill set. And if we think of it like that, we won't have to be stepping on people's toes and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's so important to just keep emphasizing for folks. And you've mentioned that you were a fitness trainer. That was your first coaching experience, and now you've transitioned into this other area. What was that transition point? What kind of sparked that pivot?
While I was coaching fitness, maybe about my 5th year, life coaching wasn't really like you would hear it, but it wasn't really like a thing. It was more so you were a therapist or you were like a minister or something like that. But I realized I liked helping people more so about getting further in life than I did getting them in shape. They went hand in hand because after we figured out what was stopping them sometimes in life, it made their attendance better in the gym. It made them show up differently for sessions. And I just never knew that that could be something. But I realized I was like, I would rather sit here an hour with you and we find out how we can move you from A to B rather than training you how to lift a barbell. I just never knew it was a thing. So as the years went on, going through some courses and just realizing that this is something that I'm actually like really passionate about. And this is something that people who work with me as clients tell me that this is why they come to me. And they're like, we can work out anywhere. We just know that the life advice is actually helping us. So after a lot of years and a lot of wrestling, I still didn't make the decision because I was like, I don't know if this is a thing. Like now, like we hear content creator and things like that. We're like, that's a real thing now. 10 years ago, it was like, so you're going to get paid to make posts. So after the years passed, I realized I was leaning more into it. And I was like, I could just write a workout for them to do, but I really want to help people get better and unstuck with life, and slowly fought that and then transitioned out of it. And it's still weird because parts of me is like, it is a real thing, but is it a real thing? If that makes sense.
Yeah. And with you said like you were helping people go from A to B and really understand what was keeping them from going there. Was there someone in your life who was doing that for you at that time?
At that time, no. That's why I wanted to do it for other people so bad because I was that person who didn't go and intentionally seek someone to help me move. As I started doing that, a guy I call him dad. He's like a dad. He started coming along, and the advice he was giving me, I was so defensive, and I was so resistant towards it. And it was amazing advice. Like if he gave who I am now that advice, then it would have been a world of a difference. But I a lot of it was because I hated not feeling helped. And I was like, until I can get this part of me healed, I'm gonna go help other people out. And for some reason it worked.
Yeah. Well, so you said you hated not feeling helped, and he was in a way trying to help you.
Hmm.
Where did that kind of like resistance come from?
It was internally. It was more so thinking that, why would you help me? Like,
Mm.
who am I that you would help? Why would you help me when you have loads of things on your plate and you have so much? Why would you help me? And then the second part that I was fighting internally was, maybe I'm not good enough for somebody to help me. And that took a lot of therapy. That took a lot of going to the drawing board, crying, processing, and realizing, oh, this person is trying to help you. They don't want anything from you. They just want to help you the way you want to help people.
And we often hear in service and in coaching, like the thing that you coach people on is the thing that you need to be coached on the most a lot of times. And so to really see that, but I want to highlight the fact that you specialize in also really helping men.
Mm-hmm.
And it can't be taken lightly, the fact that you're willing to say, like, it took a lot of crying and it took a lot
Mm-hmm.
of working on worthiness, which is something that even, in 2024, we struggle to hear men say because that's
Mm-hmm.
not, what boys do. And so
Yeah.
how did that show up for you?
It showed up because I always thought with business or with service, you're usually helping the old you of some sort. With men, I know, which is not easy, I know if I can share those things, even if it's 7 years from now, they'll be able to have like, hey, somebody else that's a man shared that he cries, that he didn't feel worthy or struggles with it. It's, I wanted men to have it because I strongly believe the fight against like men and women needs to end. And I believe if men can clearly understand who they are and how they can help themselves and help women, it's just going to make things so much easier. But I also understand that men usually don't get a lot of safe spaces. Men usually are told, go work it out. Like with a workout, go play ball, go do this, or go get tons of girls and things like that. And it's like you're not working it out. And you're possibly hindering your girlfriend, your wife, your daughter, your son. You could be doing more damage just by not having a chance to sit and realize you're doing these things because you don't feel worthy. You're doing these things because you feel isolated. You're doing these things because you won't cry. And I'm like, if you do cry and you do start to realize I can accept that I am worthy, you're gonna view the world in a totally different light. And I think if men can start doing that, it'll be better. And I'm not saying that that's easy because men are usually like I was, resistant to getting help.
Yeah, something I picked up on was you said you want to say that now so that maybe in 7 years someone picks it up, right? It might be 7 minutes, it might be 7 weeks,
Hmm.
but it's planting those seeds, and I think it goes back to what we started this conversation with, which is you don't know when that seed was planted and by
Hmm.
who. And
Hmm.
you don't know if you, as a content creator, whether it's myself, whether it's Drew, whether it's you listening, are planting a seed for someone because you chose to show up, and it might not
Mm.
manifest for 7 years, but
Mm.
that's what you're doing, and I think that that's so powerful. And it's, I think a lot of people joke about the I don't know who needs to hear this kind of hook, and it's not a good hook. Like, it's played out, but we really don't know who needs to hear it when we get called to say something. And so,
Hmm.
just your willingness to share that is planting a seed for someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to think of it as, I like to think of content as seed planting. I like to think of conversations as seed planting. I like to think of this conversation seed planting. We never know when it comes up, but I also think if I plant enough seeds every day, I'm going to be having a harvest, or those people will be having a harvest sooner than they think.
Yeah, I was just listening to a podcast, speaking of seed. They kept talking about seed planting for themselves. Like, oh, I'm planting the seeds, I'm doing the work, I'm putting in the inputs, planting the seeds, because they were expecting a harvest. And I really love the perspective of planting seeds for other people's harvests,
Hmm.
and assuming, expecting, being confident in their harvest is so abundant it'll come back to me because I helped them plant those seeds.
Or it, I see it this way. Um, just like how you said, and also me planting that amount of seeds to the people in the world, it's almost as if like I believe God's like, I'm not gonna let you plant seeds in the world without me giving you back what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And you just somehow end up getting around better people when you live with that perspective. you end up running into Isabella's, you end up running into other people who could give good conversation, good ideas, anything. So I'm always like, I'm not gonna let anybody outplant me because I know like my harvest will come from wherever, but I'm not gonna let anybody outplant me.
I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming here today and planting seeds, bringing different thoughts, different stories to people. We don't know what it will harvest for them
Mm.
at some point. So thank you so much for joining me. How can people find you on everywhere?
I think I'm everywhere as I'm on Threads, I'm on Instagram, Facebook a little retired from TikTok, but at Coach Drew Cost, that's my name all across the platforms.
Amazing. That will be in the show notes. And I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you. Have a good one.